had the satisfaction of catching me. I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism.
Actually, it's just Radio Free Innsmouth, episode 440. But we are going to be talking about a rather space-adjacent sort of band this week, that being Nocturnus, who have been a favorite of mine going way back to high school. But on that note, this episode was also somewhat inspired by a recent tragedy, the, at least for me, unexpected passing of one Mike Browning. I mean, that guy didn't even look that old. He was still very much active in the metal scene up until the present moment, and he had his hands involved in so many fundamental extreme metal concepts that there's like too much for me to just do a Mike Browning episode. All right, this guy was the original drummer and original vocalist, and one of the original minds behind Morbid Angel, who are perhaps the most important death metal band of all time. You can hear his work with them on the unreleased Abominations of Desolation album from 1986. I feel like I'm the one metalhead at this particular level of elitism, read autism, that still prefers Altars of Madness to Abominations of Desolation, but Abominations of Desolation is super fucking sick. After his exodus from Morbid Angel, he was one of the principal necromancers involved in the creation of my personal favorite death metal demo of all time, that being Incubus's Engulfed in Unspeakable Horrors, or is it God Died on His Knees? Kind of hard to tell through all the fog of 80s early death metal nonsense exactly what the fuck that demo is called. I believe the PC option nowadays is just to say that it's self-titled. Whatever the fuck it is, it's awesome. I've actually got my own personal reissue of it signed by Mike Browning himself. It's one of the only signed pieces of metal paraphernalia that I believe I own off the top of my head, along with a Keisuke Tsuboi gold ink besignatured copy of a Vomit Remnants demo compilation, and several Totale Vernichtung, Vicarious Filii Dei, and Rost Orchester albums signed by Natsock Black Metal Razorfist himself, Anti-Messiah. Those were all from a bulk eBay purchase that I don't want to tell you how much it fucking cost, but the fellow was nice enough to throw in the Stormknot and Angel Cunt albums that Anti-Messiah played on for free. I think all my other signed stuff is various pieces of K-pop or J-pop trash that none of you people care about, but I treat them like holy relics.
He's gay!
But yeah, getting back to Mike Browning, I recently found out that he actually drummed on one of the most important and undersung black metal albums from America, that being Lethal Prayer's 1996 release, Spiritual Decay. Nobody fucking talks about that album for some reason, but Mike Browning drummed on it under a pseudonym. So that's the genesis of two extreme metal genres that he's inextricably involved with. Even more recently, I found out apparently prior to his untimely passing, he was actually working on something with the Black Lord of Crucifixion from Crucifier himself, which probably would have been pretty fucking sick, and has caused the requisite RIP Mike Browning Metal Archives thread to flip from Rip the Homie to, wait a minute, is there some heckin' racism going on here?
Oh, God, blimey.
You that little boy! You
Well,
realise you're walking 5 miles an hour in a 4 mile an hour zone?
well, I didn't.
I'll have you sent to the Tower of London for this!
In the typically embarrassing tradition of that website as of late, he was also heavily involved in the great band Acheron and provided guest performances to everybody from Artificial Brain to Unaussprechlichen Koten. But by far the thing he's most famous for has gotta be Nocturnus, the band he formed after his exodus from Morbid Angel in the aftermath of him catching Trey Azagthoth with his then girlfriend and then proceeding to beat the shit out of him. Funnily enough, they ended up making up after the fact, and Trey helped Nocturnus get signed to Earache, whereupon they put out their 1990 debut full-length album, The Key, which happens to be one of the best death metal albums of all time. And even way back in 1990, when the genre was still in its infancy and like every new death metal band at the time was putting their own new original spin on the sound, this album stands out. It's real weirdo shit. For one thing, it's got keyboards provided by a fellow named Louis Panzer, and they're a major factor throughout the album. Another thing it's got going for it would have to be the lead guitar work, provided by the duo of Mike Davis and Sean McNenny, who 100% are masters of the Gino Marino, Trey Azagthoth school of Lovecraftian dissonance. But it's not just those aesthetic elements that make this album stand out, it's the arrangements themselves, which are downright apocalyptic. It all feels very orchestrated to the point where you can make an argument for this being one of the first progressive death metal albums, if not for the fact that it was also one of the most evil sounding death metal albums ever released. How the whole B-side's a concept album about a satanic robot from the future going back in time to vaporize baby Jesus.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Hell, the key that the album is named after is a glowing Levian pentagram that said robot uses to power his time machine. But what really makes this album cool is how seriously they take that concept. Like, they're not fucking around even when it comes to all the sci-fi weirdness, which lends itself to what I would call a revelatory aspect to their composition, wherein each song starts off with a bombardment of complex ideas that all build up to a great melodic revelation towards the track's end. Which is what you're hearing right now, and it's fucking awesome. Every song's got at least one major sort of revelatory moment like this. And when you apply that to all of the keyboard weirdness and insane lead guitar, it's no wonder that a lot of people consider this to be an early example of progressive death metal, like real prog rock type shit. But at the same time, a lot of tracks on here really capture like the last gasp of the chaos and primitivism of 1980s death metal. Like this track right here, Before Christ, After Death, a title which makes sense if you know the album's concept, starts off with like a Beneath the Remains style percussive riff before an explosion of lead guitar leads us into some tremolo riffage that wouldn't sound out of place on the first Rigor Mortis album. Then we're back into the percussive shit with the lead guitar kind of filling in the gaps between the chugs and Mike Browning's very evil vocal stylings. One of the most famous early Metal Archives writers, the thrash metal supremacist Ultra Boris, he hated Morbid Angel, but he loved this album. And it does actually kind of make sense why, because his argument was, this is death metal with all of the grindcore excised, as if it came only from an album like Creator's Pleasure to Kill. And yeah, I can kind of hear it, that balance of very 80s sounding stuff with the extreme technicality and speed of 90s death metal. I mean, I'm not quite at the level where I'd say something like Suck Bit Angel.
Blow it out your ass.
Like Ultra Boris would. I mean, I actually do like grindcore and 90s extremity and all that kind of stuff. I can see where he's coming from. And a lot of that more 80s style shit shows up on the older songs on this album. Songs that were originally done on their 1987 and 1988 demos, Nocturnus and The Science of Horror, respectively. Now, unlike with the case of Dismember or Entombed/Nihilist, I don't feel like these demos are an essential purchase, but they are interesting curiosities. For one, depending on which demo you're listening to, you're going to get appearances from a lot of guys that were famous for being in other bands, like Richard Bateman from Nasty Savage, Vincent Crowley from Acheron, or Gino Marino from Incubus. But there's also an interesting thing going on here, similar to Morbid Angel circa Abominations of Desolation, in that the music feels a little bit more stretched out compared to the album versions. Like, each individual note choice is a lot more discernible. There's not as much of a blur of speed and technicality going on, which I know for some people is probably a selling point. I mean, good old Fenris lists these two death metal demos as his personal favorites along with Vader's Necrolust. And you can definitely hear how the spacier, real jumbled up, horrific sounds of this release were an influence on the death metal eras of Darkthrone and Isengard. But I don't know, man. I like the full-length versions better, alright? It's way more fucking brutal. Like, are you hearing this intro riff barrage? This shit is no fucking joke. This is my favorite song on the album, and it's entitled Visions from Beyond the Grave. And it's another great example of that sort of revelatory composition, in that you're hit with that barrage of shit at the beginning, and then this melody kind of arises out of all the chaos. And you've got these just bendy, jumbled, fucked up riffs that still preserve sort of an 80s thrash feel beneath it all. Like, they're still musical in a way that a lot of 90s brutal death metal wasn't. Also, those keyboards, man, they're fucking great. Nobody else had keyboards like this. And then that lead guitar. Sean McNenny and particularly Mike Davis, they have the Gino Marino Azagtho thing going on, but with a wholly original spin to it. Less hellish and more outer spacey, which fits the fucking vibe of this album exactly. And I dare say The Key is a perfect death metal album. When it came time to do the follow-up, there's already some trouble in the band. Essentially, Mike Browning, the originator, is kind of being pushed out primarily because Earache didn't think they could sell a band with a drummer as a frontman. So for the follow-up Thresholds, they brought in a dedicated vocalist. Mike Browning is just there for drums and lyrics. The compositions are starting to be written way more by like Mike Davis, Sean McNenny, and Louis Panzer. And as a result, this album's somewhat controversial. The classic old school death metal elitist take is to say that the Dan Seagrave cover art is way better than the album itself, which at times in the past I would have agreed with, but nowadays not so much. For one thing, that's not actually fucking Dan Seagrave art.
Oh, come on!
I know, it blew my fucking mind too. It's actually done by a guy named Pete Nifton, who also did the cover art for Bolt Thrower's third album, War Master. Pretty sure this guy must have worked for Games Workshop or some shit, but he did a damn good job. But Nocturnus, despite the pushing out of Mike Browning over the course of this release, ended up doing a damn good job as well. This album isn't the death metal masterpiece that The Key was, because it's honestly not trying to be. It's doing its own thing, and over the years, I've really learned to appreciate what that thing is. That thing is not really death metal. It's more like you took a Watchtower or Coroner album and slapped a bunch of death metal aesthetics on top. There's a much more clinical sound than the disorganized chaos of the first Nocturnus release when it comes to the production, and that 100% fits the music, which is much more cold and clinical. Even lyrically, they've scaled back the Satanism in favor of sci-fi, although there is still a generally unholy atmosphere to be found here. Like this song, Climate Controller. You think it's some cyberpunk shit about controlling the weather, and it is, but it turns out the ones that are controlling the weather are like an evil scientific cabal in the employ of a bunch of Mesopotamian gods. Weirdo shit. Speaking of which, the soloing on this album is even more prog metal-y weirdness than you had on The Key. And you still get those melodic revelations towards the last third of each track, like the one you're hearing right now. And in this case, this fast melodic double bass heavy part is going to give way to this really cool mid-paced progressive rock sort of riff with some palm muted dual guitar melodies kind of fencing with the keyboard parts. You know, I want to hate this album because I love Mike Browning so much, but it's just too damn good. Like this vocal part right here, Climate Controller Weather Dominator with the big profound proclamatory vocals doing the first part of that phrase, and then the Weather Dominator is in like all the fucking fast shit at the end there. It's neat, okay? Alright, I'm sorry. You can call me a
Flat out fucking poo!
but this album actually fucking bangs. Just like with The Key, I got my favorite song on the album. This time around, it's entitled Arctic Crypt. And man, if this intro don't feel like some freezing Arctic shit. Synths almost kind of have a calming vibe to them in a very 90s FPS sort of way.
It's cold. My nipples are like pencil erasers.
Which fits the sort of sci-fi atmosphere. But eventually those thrash riffs do break through, and you'll notice I said thrash riffs, not death metal riffs. Because to me, this definitely feels more tech thrash than it feels tech death. But I fucking love tech thrash, so I think it's sick as shit either way. And particularly once the keyboards come back in, you get that really cool, unmistakable Nocturnus sort of vibe with the melody and whatnot. Then they go full Opeth. They're throwing in these like acoustic sections with the dreamy keyboards. Also surprisingly well done. And it all opens up into some of the best tech thrash, tech death, outer space, sci-fi, whatever the fuck you want to call it, kind of lead guitar. Homeboy Mike Davis was fucking cooking on this album. Apparently Trey Azagthoth himself was a big fan, and they had plans to do a collaboration that I guess never really quite panned out, which is a damn shame. Because it's really cool to hear this more melodic, traditional heavy metal sort of thing combined with the extreme Azagthoth Lovecraftian levels of chaos, at least until it descends fully into chaos, and then it's just, yeah, it's fucking weirdo outer space Lovecraft shit, and it's great. Thresholds, fantastic fucking album. Not quite as awesome as The Key, but that's probably more due to my own personal tastes. After that, we get to the most under-noticed period of Nocturnus' career. Mike Browning leaves, and I feel like that was kind of a shock to everybody's system, because their next release doesn't come out on Earache. It comes out on Moribund of all labels. And it's a self-titled 7-inch EP featuring one old song, an unrecorded song from Nocturnus' demo days, and one new song. And both of these are way more intentionally dark and death metal sounding than Thresholds was. And to my ears, this has always been maybe the best Nocturnus stuff besides The Key. Some people call this release dark art for black souls, which is incorrect. That's just a phrase that Moribund put on the spine area of the CD tray of everything they released during this time period. It is in fact a self-titled release, and this song, Possess the Priest, is the one that was an older Nocturnus song kind of reworked into a more tech thrashy style, albeit it's still way more death metal than anything on Threshold. Like, when you get hit with riffs like this, you can tell that this was written during the Mike Browning era, when they were drinking the same Lovecraftian Kool-Aid as Azathoth and company. And fuck me, does it sound great. Also, despite being on a much smaller label, for some reason the production on this album is like out fucking standing. I kind of wish The Key sounded more like this. Really cool kind of tech thrash riff leading into this like descending secret agent sounding keyboard sort of spiral staircase figure. Like, fuck, dude, this song is great, and I'm really glad they rescued it from the depths of never being recorded. With that said, the new song on this 2-song release, also fucking fantastic. It is entitled Mummified, and it's, I'm gonna go ahead and say it, it's Nile before fucking Nile.
I'm Egyptian. Oh, no, you're not. Yeah.
Not even just because of the Egyptian theme, but something to do with the very technical usage of harmonic minor and Phrygian modes. It just gives off a very Nile before Nile vibe for me. Also, special shout outs to the new vocalist on this release, a fellow by the name of Emo Maori. Easily my favorite Nocturnus vocalist, after the great Mike Browning, of course. Nobody's beating that guy. But this fella, despite the rather goofy name of Emo, brings some serious death metal heat. Got a very unique take on, I guess, sort of second and third album Morbid Angel era David Vincent type vocals. Brutal yet totally understandable. Anyway, here's a Nile part. Look, man, Nile's the band that got me into death metal. It got me into music with harsh vocals in general. I've been listening to them longer than many people listening to this episode have been alive. And I gotta say, that sounds like some fucking Nile parts. And it also sounds fucking fantastic. And at the end of the day, it just kind of makes me feel sort of sad, because this version of Nocturnus broke up before they could record a full-length album, which in my eyes is one of the all-time moments in the genre of death metal. Would really have liked to hear a full album of songs in that style. But alas, such things were not meant to be. 6 years later, in 1999, this lineup did manage to pull back together for a third Nocturnus album entitled The Ethereal Tomb, this time released on a new label, a very young Season of Mist. And for years, I heard nothing but bad shit about this album, and I didn't listen to it until maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, mostly because that fucking cover, man.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
But I have somewhat mellowed in my old age, at least when it comes to my extreme levels of metal elitism. And maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I finally decided to listen to this album, and it's definitely not a follow-up to the self-titled in any way, shape, or form. And it ain't got much to do with The Key, but as far as a follow-up to the Threshold sound, it's a surprisingly decent album. Like that release, it's more of a tech thrash release to my ears than it is a proper death metal album. Emo Maori's vocals aren't quite as all-encompassingly brutal as they were on the self-titled album, but they're still pretty fucking well done. And I feel like he might actually have had to tone down his approach to kind of meet where the rest of the band were going, with this much more clinical, technical, sterile sort of prog death kind of sound. For me, the main standout on this release has to be Louis Panzer's keyboards, which are probably the eeriest they ever sounded. Right here, he's kind of providing little staccato accents to the percussive guitar bursts, but when the band gets into more of a flow state, they really get a chance to shine. I mean, it's not The Key, it's not the self-titled, it's not even really Thresholds, but for what it is, I feel like it's pretty good. You know, it's got that spooky sci-fi atmosphere, just done in a more cold 21st century way. And the lead guitar guitars, it's still Mike Davis, it's still Sean McNenny, so obviously those are still going to be fucking fantastic. You know, it's a good album to my ears, to my brain, which has probably been melted from way too many fucking years of listening to Vector albums in the homeboy's basement smoking the devil's lettuce. But even this version of Nocturnus didn't last very long, okay? I feel like there's a curse upon this band, probably because they did some legal bullshit back during the Thresholds era to sort of wrestle the Nocturnus name away from Mike Browning, who was the proper creator. But Mike Browning did strike back. He did start up a new band called After Death that was also quite good, and eventually morphed into something called Nocturnus AD, which is like The Key Parts 2 and Part 3. That's those Nocturnus AD albums. I might cover After Death at some point, because even prior to them basically turning into the real version of Nocturnus, that's some interesting shit. But Nocturnus, just, you know, no suffix at the end. I'd say it's all pretty fucking sick. The Key is essential. The self-titled EP is essential. If you're a wacko like me, even Threshold is essential. And hopefully I was able to convince you of the veracity of that statement over the course of this episode. But hey, whatever the case may be, thank you for listening or watching or however the fuck you chose to consume this particular piece of media. And I'll see you next week with some more good shit. Rip the homie Mike Browning. Bye-bye.
Aliens fucked over the carburetor in number 4. I'm gonna try to recalculate it, land on Juniper. Hopefully you got some space lead over.
How's that, buddy? I don't fucking know.
Ricky, that's not very good. Use space words, real ones, not talking about space weed.